Hello, welcome to Anime Vitality. We are going to be drinking some Little Tongmu brewed Gong Fu style, and we are going to be chatting about Mob Psycho 100. My name is Austin.
I'm Jett.
And thank you for joining us today. So, for those of you who have not seen Mob Psycho 100, I would have to say it's a over-the-top psychedelic fever dream, but I say this in the absolute best way possible. The story, it follows Shigeo Kageyama, or Mob, in his journey as a middle school student, psychic, and part-time exorcist. Not allowing his powers to define himself, as well as past traumas, creating a strong personal ethic code for not using his powers on people. Mob spends the series experiencing a multitude of growing pains due to trauma of Mob losing his composure as a kid and his brother Ritsu getting hurt in the encounter. Mob remains very stoic throughout the series, repressing his emotions until a meter builds, typically in number format, up to 100. And at that point, it showcases some incredible power at the detriment of losing control. So, starting in the first season, Mob spends most of his time working with a con man and self-proclaimed psychic master Reagan Arataka, working part-time at like 300 yen an hour. That's like $2. At the Spirits and Such consultation office. As the season develops, Mob really starts to become active in the Body Improvement Club, which he made this choice over the Telepathy Club, which was kind of a left field moment that I thought was really funny. And in the hopes that would help him be noticed by his childhood crush, Tsubomi. This is Artie, by the way. He'll come in and out. Mob overthrows a cult and befriends the spirit responsible named Dimple, who's also a great character. And this feat gains the attention of Misato, who she is with the school paper.
Journalist.
So, she spends a lot of the series trying to convince Mob to create essentially a religion just based upon his powers, which is an interesting dynamic. And as time progresses, he eventually meets a fellow Esper named Teruki Hanazawa Oteru, which was one of the first exciting encounters of the show. And it really showcases Mob's not only scale of power, but his internal resolve to not use those on people. By the end of this encounter, not only does his beliefs really impact Teru, but it creates an interesting rivalry and a friendship that is maintained throughout the series. And it creates an incredible moment in the show where Teru's hair is huge. And I thought that was really funny as well.
And he just rocks with it for
he does
the longest time.
Until it gets cut down again.
Yeah.
So this exchange embellishes and creates a position for Mob to be essentially the shadow leader of his middle school, and he is dubbed White Tea Poison because he had his white t-shirt on from his Body Improvement Club. And hordes of people eventually step up to challenge this White Tea Poison. No one knows it's Mob. And at this point, Ritsu, Mob's brother, kind of steps into the show in a little more involved way. And
their relationship is super interesting. Yeah, so I like how you see pretty early on Mob and Ritsu's relationship. Ritsu, more than anything, wants to be able to just kind of talk with his brother, be there with his brother.
Yeah.
And essentially Mob wants the same thing. However, the first time Mob loses control of his powers, he ends up, and of course this is when they're so young, and he ends up hurting Ritsu pretty good in the wake of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because some kids were bullying them.
Yeah, some older kids were kind of messing with Ritsu, and Mob loses it and ends up hurting everyone. And so it's pretty wild that from that point on, ever since that day when they were younger, their relationship is pretty heavily strained. And that's just kind of a dynamic between those two. But obviously that relationship improves, and that's probably one of the most important relationships you'll see throughout the entirety of the show.
It really is, and this moment really develops Ritsu and gives him some interesting character development because he shows a lot of frustration in not having psychic abilities like his brother, and a gentleman who is interested in researching psychic abilities and unlocking them within people contacts Ritsu. Although he meant for it to be Mob, Ritsu takes it up anyways because he's always wanted this. And frustrated by his lack of progress, which he didn't realize, he did kind of tap into it because he bent up that spoon after he left frustratedly. And Dimple takes advantage of this, and he possesses Ritsu and fully unlocks those powers up until the point where Ritsu can tap into them without Dimple. But he kind of goes on a rampage. He starts beating up all these people, and he takes on the persona of White Tea Poison, which was interesting. And Mob hears about this, and he finds out it's Ritsu, and
he's so happy for him because he knows that Ritsu. He kind of understands that Ritsu.
That was his first emotion. Yeah, he was proud of him.
Yeah, he was so proud of him and happy for him. And Ritsu was just stunned.
So full of hate.
Yeah, just stunned that was the case. So, and that was awesome. That was an awesome moment. And back to Dimple though, I love how it's interesting. So obviously Dimple, he's the cult leader for LOL. Yeah, he's a cult leader for LOL, and he's amassed these people who, what would you say that they're? It's interesting because it's this silly thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
However, you can see where people would fall into that. Like it's people who
want purpose.
Yeah, and like they're like the LOL. Like Dimple just makes them laugh. It makes them happy, and like
it's for a cult very tame.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like Dimple, his whole thing is he wants to be a god of of people, and the cult itself it wasn't really harming anybody,
But the root of it was a spirit, and that's what got Reagan and Mob involved in the first place. And an interesting decision is Mob deemed Dimple post exorcism. He didn't complete the job, and he deemed him so insignificant. It wasn't worth it.
Absolutely, exactly. Like and the fight scene, of course, is between Dimple and Mob originally. So cool. And then so he just this gigantic Dimple Mob just obliterates him pretty effortlessly, and which is kind of Mob's whole. He's so powerful. I don't think he really realizes at the beginning how powerful he is, but
especially when he taps into his emotional side.
Yeah. And he just whenever his psychometer hits 100, yeah, and yeah. So, but like Austin said, Dimple's so insignificant. Just kind of like whatever. Like you're now this just floating. Yeah, exactly. Like a pet, like just this floating entity, and I'm just gonna go about my way.
It's not worth the effort.
Mm-hmm. And then of course Dimple kind of clings to Mob afterwards.
Mostly out of a desire to eventually take advantage of his power. Wait until he's susceptible at that point.
And I think that's one of the so genius plot points.
It really play into that well.
Yeah, and like you don't really see it. Like you're kind of like, okay, well, Dimple is such an interesting character. He's funny. I guess he's gonna ride with Mob now. Whenever obviously there's so much more to it than that. And then to speak on Reagan a little bit, who is probably my favorite
best character development, I think.
Reagan's awesome, and definitely my favorite character.
I think especially I think you really don't see it until season 2, But I think he's shown a lot. Obviously, you're rooting for Mob the whole time. He shows a lot of really good character development. Starting the show as, a kid whose only friend really is Reagan, a con man.
Yeah.
Who keeps him around for his business. And he makes a lot of genuine friends. All the Body Improvement Club moments are very genuine and wholesome.
A lot of genuine moments, absolutely. I think it's my favorite thing though, or what I really like is the first few episodes whenever you're really kind of getting to see Reagan. So I believe Mob's like getting off of school and Reagan pulls out a cell phone. And he's like, Mob, gotta get down here. There's this spirit haunting these people. And then so Mob's kind of like, he doesn't really want to do it, but Reagan's like, dude, get down here. Mob gets down there, and obviously, then you really see like, Reagan is everybody's favorite, the most lovable pathological liar.
Yeah, exuding charisma.
Right, and so there's the people who originally hired Reagan. And Reagan is there, and Mob kind of he gets there eventually. And I love Reagan's special move, salt throwing.
Yeah.
And he just douses everybody in salt, and of course the animation is so funny. And then eventually he's like, Mob, handle it, and Mob exorcises the spirit. So I noticed Reagan is as funny and goofy as he is. He's equally lovable, and he really is a good role model for Mob, even though he's a kind of a scumbag con artist. At the end of the day, he gets done. He helps these people out, and he really is a good influence on Mob. So
I think the root of him is good.
Yeah, exactly. The root of him is good.
It's shaped in, I would say, ill intent, but I think as you dig deeper, it's good intentions.
Absolutely.
So after Ritsu and Mob finally have a breakthrough, Ritsu can lean on his brother, finally, because he's been walking on eggshells ever since the incident. And Mob feels like he has a brother in Ritsu as well. He doesn't have to put on this facade of, being strong. We're finally introduced to probably the big bad of the series, which is Claw, and an incredibly powerful Esper comes in and just wrecks shop, and ends up kidnapping Ritsu, and
because he thinks he's a
he's the strong one.
Mob.
Because they gave him orders to find this white tea poison, and since he put on this facade, it got him kidnapped. Which is an interesting
trope in and of itself. Yeah.
And so the remainder of the season is really spent with Mob, and then Taro comes in, and they're breaking out the kidnapped Espers. On top of Ritsu being kidnapped, the gentleman who inquired in the first place had this little ragtag group of Espers on a completely different level as Mob and Taro and Ritsu, who can have a little flame appear, or the brothers, the one that looked like a little Minecraft guy.
Yeah,
and the other
they're so funny. So, but it is funny because these Espers, as the psychics call themselves, with Claw, it's your first time seeing another powerful Esper besides Teru, and it's interesting to note that that Teru kind of goes on this journey with Mob, as obviously they were the first enemies, or not even real. I mean, Teru just was on a whole ego power trip.
Because that was Mob's big thing. He never wanted his powers to define him, and that was his big point with Teru, who his powers did define him, and it was a big wake up call.
And that remains to be one of the main focal points of the show is Mob does not want to be he just wants to be a normal guy more than anything else.
And in the beginning, I thought it was really funny that he picked the Body Improvement Club over the Telepathy Club, because obviously he could really fit into a Telepathy Club, but
the show
it makes more sense.
Yeah, it takes a complete left turn. whenever they're begging him, obviously the mob, the psychic, and what would you call them? They're like the ones who are in the telepathy club originally. They're kind of
the president sucked him out.
Yeah,
because he was the only kid in school who wasn't a part of any clubs, and she was like, please.
And their club wasn't even. They just played games and snacked all day. So I'm trying to think of a good word for them. But yeah, they're
it's like slackers.
Yeah, slackers. They just like they don't do anything. They just kind of slack, and they use that club. They take up that room for their slacking activities.
Slacking and snacking.
And so, obviously, the president begging mob to join the club so they can have enough members to continue to occupy that space in the club. Mob just takes a complete left turn, joins the body improvement club, which is hilarious because obviously, mob has like the stamina of
a child.
Yeah,
like a
geriatric hamster, and the muscles to match it as well. And then, so he just, but
it solidifies his point of like, my powers will not define me, and it's important for me to overcome these things without them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also worth noting that Reagan helped him make that decision. And which is interesting because as self-centered as Reagan's character is, whenever Mob was talking to him, was like, what should I do here? And Reagan, knowing that the telepathy club would take up some of his work time, and the body improvement club would take up even more work time, he still told Mob, join the body improvement club, like, you need this. And, even though it's going to cut into our time, like,
it was kind of a low blow too, because he was like, you need to have friends.
Yeah,
like,
you got it, exactly.
And segueing into Reagan, Mob kind of goes radio silent, and he's like, what's going on? And he ends up finding where he is. And it was a really funny moment, because he essentially infiltrates Claw by the impression of him being the boss, and everyone's just freaking out. And Mob, I don't think willingly or at least knowingly transferred his powers to Reagan, and it gave him this facade of like, you guys are pretending, like this sword that you're making deadly with your psychic powers as a toy, and he snaps
exactly. And so
it was so funny.
In typical Reagan fashion, he does that now. And so Hanazawa and Mob obviously try to rescue. They capture the guy who'd had his middle fingers,
the middle finger whips,
his whips. Obviously, he tries to hunt out Mob and Hanazawa. They capture him. He makes them spill the information of where they're located. So Hanazawa and Mob go there, and are eventually captured in the process. And obviously, all the espers in Claw, they're just wildly powerful. And so,
especially the gravity guy.
Yeah, exactly. And so, to Austin's point, whenever Reagan discovers, their location, and he just marches right up there, and they see him, older gentleman in his suit. They're like, he's the boss.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I'm the boss. Like, and just eventually walks right to the grounds where Hanazawa and Mob are battling with these other espers, and typical Reagan fashion, not unknowingly having
he kind of gets on his pedestal and starts talking about.
So you guys are acting like children, and the guy with the I can't remember his name, but he has the shoulder pad, the gold shoulder pads, and the dot on his head. Reagan completely just shuts him down. He's like, what are you wearing? What is this? He's like, these hold no other purpose than for your
little shtick.
Yeah, your little shtick here, this thing you got going on. And he's just, that alone, he feels defeated. And just obliterates every single Claw member there. And it's in hilarious, incredibly animated fashion.
The animation in this series deserves some time in its own. So unique. They do so many interesting things with it, and it really seems. It gives you that authentic hand-drawn feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen on my many delves into Reddit, I've seen people are like split 50-50 on whether they like the style. And obviously this is the writer one. Mm-hmm. This is just his style.
Because it started as like what, a web series?
Exactly. And so, it's just his style, but with the intentionally low,
like the grittiness.
Yeah, the grittiness and low detail. You can do so much.
But he made it so beautiful. And that's what's so.
Yeah, like it is what it's its own thing. Mm-hmm. But it's all intentionally done, and with the quality. I feel like they can focus so much more on the fight, the incredibly animated scenes.
They can really blow their budget.
Yeah, exactly. That's what, and it's worth it.
Oh, every time.
Yeah, and like it is some of the most jaw-dropping, incredible animation, and yeah, just to echo Austin's point, that definitely deserves some time on its own. Mm-hmm. It's awesome.
I can see why people don't like it. It's it deviates a lot from what we know to be anime and the style, mm-hmm. and typically it's very sharp, it's very defined, and this kind of
very detailed,
it really takes a step away from all of that, mm-hmm. while also giving its own luster and character. I think it just gives itself so much more character by being so. It takes itself as seriously in its animation and art style as the story itself, while also being very serious and authentic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it pairs well with everything. But that really wraps up the first season. Mm-hmm. The first season was great, and I think it only hits its stride even more in 2, and then 3 was just a great time.
And just real quickly to talk about, you had mentioned earlier the rich guy that kind of comes out of nowhere and for the sole purpose of gathering up espers, to research them. So it's really just to note, like, he this guy who kind of I guess has expendable income just because of his family. He spends all of his time, researching espers. He's blown away by their abilities, very fascinated by it, and so he gathers all these people, Ritsu included, and obviously Ritsu is the most powerful one. His I guess abilities kind of somewhat echo mobs, and where it's all encompassing, maybe. Mm-hmm. I guess would be a way I could describe that, but just nowhere near the extreme of raw power.
Yeah.
Whereas the other guys in here, there's the
they can communicate telepathically.
Yeah. So the twins, the blockhead Minecraft-looking twins, they communicate telepathically only to one another, and that's another just charm of the show. Is these guys are all kind of maybe not all full of themselves.
They think they're hot shit, though.
But they do think they are hot shit, and it's just completely obviously Ritsu is completely underwhelmed whenever he's kind of like he sees what they can do, and so there's the twins who can talk telepathically only to one another, and
there's the Elvis guy who can barely lift small things.
He can just veins popping out of everywhere. He's trying his hardest, and he barely moves something. There's the girl. I can't remember what the girl.
She has like divination. She has like a 60% chance of like predicting like flipping over cards or whatever.
Exactly. And so I don't even know if like us speak on doesn't do it justice how funny that whole trope is. And that's another thing. I'm not really into like comedy. I'm really into like serious. Mm-hmm. I like romance and action, mm-hmm. and so Mob Psycho is kind of
it's almost all encompassing in itself. Yeah. Because although without definitely touching more into action, mm-hmm. but definitely some slice of life going on.
Yeah.
A little bit of romance with more intent for romance mm-hmm. with Tsubami, but action for sure. but I think it dabbles more into other aspects than your typical like shonen.
Yeah, and I think this is probably the first show or anime that's really made me laugh out loud. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I saw, this is one of Reagan's special moves, and you know Reagan is just extremely animated, fast hand movements, and he's just throwing that salt everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then the spirit's just kind of hanging out like, what are you doing?
I think you need Himalayan salt.
Yeah, exactly.
This is table salt.
Exactly. That really did it for me. Like I laughed out loud, and I was like, I just knew from that, like, I'm gonna like this. This is funny.
Yeah.
And so probably, I think my absolute favorite moment of season 1 was they get a call for a job where I think it's the smell spirit who was taking over the girls basketball, the all girls school. Uh-huh. And so, you know, Reagan's giving Bob some advice. They're walking, they're talking. I think maybe even some advice about him joining one of the clubs. Uh-huh. And he's like, if you don't want to do something, like, don't, you know, he's kind of just talking to him. And then Bob was like, well, I really don't want to be doing, the only thing I don't want to be doing right now is this. And, you know,
they're dressed as women.
They're dressed as women. And
Reagan gets branded as like a pervert.
Yeah, it's so funny because they get to the gate of this all-girls high school academy, and you know the security guard's like, "Whoa, like, what are you doing?" He can tell obviously Alex Reagan right away. He sees Reagan's hairy legs sticking out of his skirt, and obviously Reagan's like 5'10", and this is all-girls high school, you know, and so obviously Reagan immediately gets stopped, and I love Reagan's like, what are you talking about? Like, I go here, you know? And it was just so perfect, and that also made me laugh out loud.
And I think what was just the cherry on top of that moment was how upset Mob got for skirting under the radar. Yeah. Like, he was upset that he didn't get outed too.
Exactly. The security guard's like, hey, like, stay away from this creep. That's creep right here.
Go in
there. Yeah. What would you say is your favorite season 1 moment?
My favorite season 1 moment, as cliche as it is to say, it was really impactful and at the same time very nonchalant, was Reagan getting a taste of psychic abilities. Yeah. And just...
No, that was great. That was great.
Because I think it really played into who he is as a con man, is he's like, this is all bullshit. Yeah, and absolutely. Like, these orbs are nothing, your sword is fake. And you're dressed like a doofus. Like,
what's the saying that you can't, like
you can't keep teaching old dog new tricks.
Yeah, or something. You can't con like a con man kind of thing. You can't, you know. So, yeah, like just to kind of echo what you said, it does definitely speak to that.
But all in all, season 1 was a great time.
Absolutely.
Season 2, I had a great time with. To start off, I think season 2 had the best intro. It was just really fun to watch. Another thing that I picked up on early on is there's broccoli in all of the openings, and I thought that was so weird until I got to 3rd season, and I was like, they've been planting this seed for a long time.
Exactly, and they do that. They I've just seen so many people talk about how all of the arcs somewhat connect to one another. And so like they're very good about planting the seed, as you said.
Absolutely, literally in season 3.
Literally.
But to kind of summarize what goes on in the 2nd season, after all the hubbub with Claw and the Scar upper echelon settle down, the season begins on a relatively normal note. An opportunity to run for school council presents itself, and so Mob takes it upon himself to take this, obviously just to win over Tsubami's heart, which is his childhood love interest.
Yeah, and just to note real quickly, like that is kind of like the main point of the whole show is you know, he has these incredible psychic abilities, which are all awe-inspiring to everybody he comes across. But he just wants to be a normal guy. He loves Tsubame, really likes Tsubame, just really kind of wants to be her friend.
Because she knows he has those abilities,
and
and she never got freaked out about it.
Exactly, and so that's kind of where they had bonded as when they were children, because they've known each other since they were children. But but I think the unspoken kind of thing is, even though he has these awe-inspiring abilities, she wasn't really impressed by that, and that's all he wants to do is impress her. Kind of, you know, in a nutshell, that's what's going on there.
So Body Improvement Club, student council president,
Exactly.
I think she's gonna have to lean into to get that
Yeah.
approval, and it unfortunately leads to a very painful 5 minutes of silence. I think everyone gets a 5-minute speech, and he just sat there frozen. Which
After
got him some notoriety with other people. Other
Yeah.
people thought it was kind of funny.
So after he had just gained some morsel of confidence, you know, he was convinced that maybe he can do this, as in be the school president, student body president.
Shattered.
Yeah, shattered. And so, and that's another thing to note is, like, we had in season 1 we had our laughs. We were introduced to the characters. We had our laughs. We saw some pretty cool action sequences. Now it's like season 2 is like emotional. Like these are you know, you really are gonna feel for these characters and whatnot. So
You really do. I think season 1 does a good job of setting the stage for all these characters, and I think season 2 is really when they start to develop them, which is probably what I liked the most about this season. So after that horrible experience, things at Spirit and Such Consultations, which is his part-time job,
that Reagan is the owner of.
Things really settle down. It's pretty slow, so Reagan and Mob resort to hitting the streets to try and find some business. And I can't remember what the Union of Exorcists was called, but they kind of become introduced to them and get some negative notoriety because they're the only psychics not a part of it. But they end up meeting a girl who asks if they can look into these urban legends going on, and they're accompanied by one of the Union guys, the guy with the big wooden balls.
Yeah.
And it ends up being interesting. Not all of it was complete garbage, and they end up getting some credit with that guy for saving his skin, because it ended up being a legitimate spirit to exercise that he was not powerful enough to take care of. Which the success of that endeavor and a delightfully cheesy website. I love Reagan's website.
Oh yeah.
It's so late 90s, early 2000s, because it even has the counter on the bottom of people who have visited his site.
Yeah.
And I just love it. But things really start to pick up, and I guess to Mob's detriment, this is when he starts realizing I can kind of have a social life now.
Yeah.
He's got friends with psychics within his Body Improvement Club, and then I guess the Telepathy Club, and he's starting to kind of get out there and meet people.
He has exactly, which he had never done before. He's very much a recluse, and so he had never done that. Now, Reagan, to piggyback off of your point there, Mob is really Reagan's only friend, which, you know, they work together, and
he's a middle schooler.
But Mob is really Reagan's only friend, and Mob gives Reagan a sense of purpose. Like, I'm stewarding this young man here, and I'm. Of course, it's another funny aspect of it is Reagan is Mob's teacher, master, sensei, if you will, to all things psychic abilities when he has none.
Yeah.
And of course, he lies to Mob and I'm too powerful. You need to handle this, because there's no telling if I did this. There's no telling what's going to happen. So
yeah, it didn't even register on my radar. It was so weak. You handle it.
Exactly,
Mob.
and that's kind of more of a trope in season 1, but yeah. So Reagan definitely notices Mob. He's calling him, and Mob's saying I'm too busy. I'm at karaoke with the guys or with my friends, and
throughout the series he does say he is very annoyed at how Reagan will call him and say, "I need you here right now."
Mm-hmm.
Even in season 1, he's like, "You need to stop doing that."
Yeah. Yeah.
This was definitely the breaking point for Mob.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess kind of their last hurrah is whenever a particularly important job surfaces from a gentleman named Asagiri Masashi, who's a incredibly wealthy businessman, and his daughter Minori has been possessed, and he basically rounds up all the psychics he can, which Reagan ends up being looped into because of his excursion with the urban legends.
Yeah, and so he offers him 500,000 yen, I guess,
Which is a lot of money.
Yeah, to whoever can exorcise his daughter.
Yeah. So all these psychics, they come in and they do everything they can, and to no avail. And Mob essentially, of course, Reagan's not going to leave this money on the table.
Right.
So,
it's the second he hears 500,000 yen, and this is a room full of
the nation's best.
Yeah, it's like shoulder to shoulder in this massive warehouse building.
Mm-hmm.
The nation's top psychics, and Reagan and Mob. Of course, now Reagan, who has no psychic ability, is pushing past all these people. I'm the first, I'll be the first one to go in there, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's this, this glass. I believe one-way glass, huge, and the daughter is in that room,
like strapped to a bed.
Strapped to it, which her father had strapped her to the bed, and this is a really interesting thing because.
You feel bad for her.
Yeah, you feel bad for her.
She makes him seem like a lunatic at first.
And she's even talking about, like, my father literally strapped me in here now. Of course, everyone's kind of like, is that her speaking? Is that the spirit?
You could tell the room was, like, divided.
Yeah, weird. Yeah, there's just a weird vibe in there in general.
But it ends up being that she is possessed by a very powerful spirit, Mogami Kaiji, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Yeah, Kaiji Mogami.
And he was what Reagan wanted to be. He was the Esper of the 20th century. So I guess his thing was he was kind of wheeling and dealing to take care of his mom, and
so this Kaiji was the most notable psychic of the 20th century, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and famed for it somewhat. He definitely had notoriety,
mm-hmm.
and then but like his mom, had become sick,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like a if I understood correctly, it was like a direct effect. Like she was kind of feeding off like whatever, some kind of energy that
he was cursed because he was wheeling and dealing, kind of being a con man.
Yeah.
And the negative energy that was attached to him and the curses that were afflicted upon him were her ultimate demise.
Right.
And
so he becomes an assassin, right?
He uses his powers to go after people. He does a complete 180, and he's now, I use these powers for me and me alone. And his ultimate goal is to become a vengeful spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and to plague other people like people have plagued him in his life.
Yeah. So this arc is really cool, because you really get to see, because you can relate to this guy Kaiji,
Mm-hmm.
because
Most people do what they can to protect their family.
yeah, and now he was also always kind of used by the politician, just the upper echelon, and now he wants to become, he's dead set on becoming a vengeful spirit, and he's like, so one of the most important things that Mob kind of says is like people can change, like,
Mm-hmm.
and so now Kaiji here, he
does not believe that.
Yeah, he doesn't believe that. He, and or maybe like people can change, but most people are not going to, And so just it's obviously just a really cool battle between them, and
it's like an interesting battlefield, I guess, because it's within the psyche of Minori.
Yes, and that's a whole other thing on its own. Like there's just so many complex, just different kind of ongoings here.
Mm-hmm. And Kaiji goes out of his way to prove his point by creating like a shadow world in which Mob believes it's his normal world and he has no powers, and he shows him the extent of the cruelty of people. And Minori, even being herself, takes it upon herself to bully him with the rest of the people.
Right, and so they get sucked, like you said, into Minori's psyche, who was the girl who had become possessed. Mm-hmm. And so now it's the spirit of Kaiji and Mob now like into this psyche, that this world universe that Kaiji's kind of created, in which this girl that's possessed is kind of showing like her true colors, or her true colors are being kind of like she's a bully essentially, and she kind of has her own thing going on where
she's like the new kid, and she's like, well, I'm not going to be a bigger loser than this guy.
Exactly. So there's that kind of trope there, and so there's all this kind of world building material now,
and he makes him endure that for 6 months.
Yeah.
Obviously not in real time, but within the psyche of Minori, Mob lives out 6 months worth of days of just pure torture.
Yeah, and he's kind of breaking along in there. Mm-hmm. But of course, Dimple comes, or kind of appears to which obviously Dimple is supposed like he's not a good guy, but he does he has
his motives put him on that path sometimes.
Yeah. Where he's giving Mob some like really good advice here, and it's and their relationship of, I wish I kind of would have spoken on that more. Dimple and Reagan kind of like are the opposite, somewhat. I mean, Dimple is like almost honest to a fault, whereas I mean, not that Reagan's not, but
he puts on a facade for sure.
Exactly, whereas Dimple's like,
I want to be a god.
He's that friend who's gonna like. The truth hurts sometimes, but you gotta hear this, So yeah, but sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No. But as Mob's really about to break, and he taps into his powers, and Kaiji's like, "Yeah, see, I told you.
Yeah.
Like the world sucks. You need to use your power to put people down."
Mm-hmm.
Dimple comes in, and he really puts everything into perspective, and he reminds him of the world outside of what he's experiencing, and Mob's ideals come back into place, and he stops himself, and he eventually exorcises Kaiji.
Yeah.
And which this is an important plot point, but one of the Scar upper echelons actually captures Kaiji in a poison jar, and he's like, I'm keeping this for later.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting. I kind of
forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah. But back to Dimple, their dynamic is very interesting. And I definitely agree with your point of them being like two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. And Mob being what holds them together. Because Reagan kind of positively takes advantage of Mob. Mm-hmm. Like, I think the intentions are good outside of that's his cash cow.
Yeah. It's like actions are bad, intentions are good kind of thing is kind of what Reagan personified, Yeah, and Reagan, but now Reagan, I do Reagan's skill set of psychoanalysis and extreme he's an expert in psychoanalysis and rhetoric, which is really cool to see on its own,
yeah, perfect for a con man too.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it is like, it's heartwarming to see Dimple kind of go in there and reassure Mob. Just whenever he's on the brink of
losing it.
Yeah, losing it.
Because, I mean, and it goes back to Dimple's intentions of, well, if I lose him now, I can't possess him later and tap into all these crazy powers. So that ends up kind of fizzling out. They do the job. Minori actually apologizes for being that way, and Mob even asks her, like, "Are you actually this way in person?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then she starts crying, and she's like, "I'm sorry," which was pretty sincere.
Even Kaiji kind of had a moment too just before he was exorcised. So yeah, then like you said, Minori, she kind of has
a moment.
Yeah. Because even though she bullied him hardcore, once she sees that, like, I treated him this way, he still did this for me. She kind of grows up a little bit in her own sense there.
And Mob facilitates a lot of growth within the characters around him, which I really like, because that's his ultimate goal.
Yeah, like, it's like he learns something and then he teaches that to to whomever is at hand at the moment.
And this kind of spearheads into really a big rift in Reagan and Mob's relationship. Mob's pretty fed up with the poor work and life balance, where he has to give up everything to go take care of whatever Reagan needs, which to this point in time has never really been an issue, because what is Mob doing? But now it's pretty relevant to Mob and really bothering him. So they basically, it almost feels like a breakup. They have a falling out, and Mob's pretty much told Reagan he's done for now. And Reagan honestly really dug into him. He had a pretty condescending, rough talk. And I don't blame Mob, honestly. So they kind of go off and do their own things. So probably one of my favorite moments of season 2 is at this point where Mob and Reagan kind of go off on their own paths. Mob's enjoying, middle school life, and Reagan has to find his way alone, and he almost, I don't want to say he hits rock bottom, but he really realizes a lot about himself, and that, he goes to the bar he goes to, and he's like, these are all fake relationships.
And this is like he really kind of pushes Mob away here. They kind of having what would you call it, a falling out of sorts. Whenever Reagan tells him, like, hey man, these friends you're getting now, like, they're kind of just they're kind of using you, and they're not real friends, like. And that obviously it's pretty upsetting for Mob to hear that, as he feels like connection with these people, and this is his first time in his life to have people he calls friends, and this is the first kind of callous thing that Reagan really does. I mean, obviously Reagan lies to him, and Reagan manipulates him in some ways, but every time it's turned out
some sort of good intention.
Yeah, like there's good intention. This is like the first time where
completely selfish.
Yeah, completely selfish.
You pick them or me.
Yeah, and so they have their falling out, and and like you were saying, I would say Reagan probably does hit rock bottom here. Because he spends time reflecting on, like, spirits and such.
How can I make this better?
Yeah, and so, like, he's had huge success, especially after the exorcism of Minori, the spirit that was in what was it, Kaiji, right?
Kaiji was the spirit within Minori.
Yeah, and so he kind of found a huge success. His website was just blowing up, and then this is kind of whenever he and Mob have his falling out, and so within the span of just a few days, he is, like, on top. He has everything. He goes on that TV show.
Oh, that was so awful.
Which is so.
That was the karma for the underhandedness of the Psychics Union.
Yeah,
because he's who recommended Reagan was the head of the Psychics Union.
Yeah,
and it was all a sham. It was a kid pretending to be possessed, and Reagan even picks up on it, but he's like, "I'll just play it out. This is TV.
This is television. Like, this is what they want." Yeah.
and
whereas obviously,
blows up.
yeah, and what is that guy? What is his name?
The old man.
Yeah,
I can't remember. I cannot recall his name, but he basically immediately steps up and he's like, "This kid's faking."
he has some sort of. He doesn't like Reagan for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
He has some sort of grudge against him. I can't exactly remember what for.
I think it's because he's the only psychic not in the Union, the like Rising Sun Union or something. But he really gives it to him, and I think this was the moment that kind of brings Mob back into him, because Reagan, grasping at straws, is like, okay, I need to do a press conference because I'm finally relevant, at least within this realm, and it's all falling apart.
Yeah, and this was like everyone's watching this television. Like everyone's watching this. I want to say the old man starts with like a J or something. But anyway, so and then he like you said, he stands up. This kid's faking. Reagan, and then obviously Reagan gets exposed right then and there, and like also like you had mentioned, like this is kind of his. He get what's coming to him. He kind of gets what's coming to him from karma, like you said, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so now, like this is huge. Reagan amassed this almost overnight success, and then just gets humiliates himself on TV, and now it's all blowing up in his face. He's getting like doxxed.
People are roasting him online.
Yeah, and like they throw up his childhood photos, and even like his address is even doxxed as well. And so I would probably say the closest thing to rock bottom as rock bottom can be. And he's like, okay, I need to host this press conference, and it's almost like it's really touching because he's sitting there, he's kind of reflecting some, he's pretty down on himself. All these cameras in his face flashing, and media's asking him questions, and he looks right past all of them. He looks right past the flashing lights and the cameraman, the paparazzi, so to speak, and he's like, Mob, like you've really grown up a lot, and
because they ask him, why did you even do this in the first place, and he starts thinking like, why did I?
Yeah.
And like I left my job, I was tired of it. I thought I'd do this for like a year, and Mob rolls in and he realizes, I've been doing this to be Mob's mentor.
And I think this is kind of like the first time you see, I can't remember exactly, but I think it's almost like maybe the first time you see whenever Mob strolls into spirits and such consultation as a kid and
seeking help
and advice. He's like, oh, spirits, and like this guy know how to help me. He kind of walks in there. Reagan is surprised to see a kid, and without ever even knowing that Mob is a psychic, he kind of gives him the advice of like being a psychic, like it doesn't make you, like it just makes you different. Just like it's a characteristic that's like the same as book smarts or whatever the case may be.
But it doesn't make you less of a person.
It doesn't make you less of a person. Doesn't make you more of a person. It just makes you different in the same way that everyone's different, with their characteristics. And in typical Reagan fashion of kind of, he like he's psychoanalyzes, and he can kind of see what people want to hear, and he'll tell them what they need to hear. And he did that with Mob, gave him some advice that really kind of sticks with him for the entirety of the show before he even knew he was a psychic. And so that's just really cool. Seeing that callback and seeing Reagan reflect on that, and then him speaking, looks past everyone and he just kind of says, "Mob, you've really grown up a lot," and it's touching, and it's still in typical Reagan fashion. Like he's struggling to say I'm sorry, like a direct I'm sorry,
in a very roundabout, like brushing off.
Yeah, he's like,
kind of
"Mob, you've really grown up a lot," and as you can tell he's reflecting on it, and probably the most touching moment of the show. And so is that what you were saying was like your favorite part, or where?
For this season, absolutely. And even I think it shows a sorry, cat interference. Classic cat interference, but really for this season, it shows a lot of growth for Reagan, who we haven't really seen a lot of at this point. And in Reagan reaching out and kind of affirming to Mob, like, almost like you've grown up, I'm proud of you, like a dadly thing.
Yeah.
Mob returns that by interfering with the press conference with the psychic powers, and Reagan can kind of like put on a front of like, am I phony now?
Yeah.
And everyone's all freaking out.
Exactly, yeah.
He, in that moment, gains his notoriety back, and he has an out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, to piggyback off of that, it's so interesting because it's like, okay, so what does Mob know now? Because Reagan, he never really directly says, I was lying to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he never directly says, like, this was a facade. He just kind of... Mob does that for him. And then Mob never directly says...
I forgive you.
Yeah, and he also never directly says, like, I know you were lying.
Yeah.
And so you're still kind of wondering, like, what does Mob know?
And then they have that really... This is probably my favorite portion, is after the fact, when they have that heartwarming... I think it's during, like, ending credits, but...
Yeah.
Reagan essentially tries to tell him, like, you've probably known all along.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's alluding to the fact that he's a phony, and Mob's like, yes, I have known all along, that you're a great guy.
Yeah, exactly. And the way he says it, he's like, you know, like you said, like, have you known all along? Or it's like, I'm sure you've seen the TVs and this and that. And Mob's kind of like, I've known all along that you're just a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I was just like, oh, and because, yeah, it was nice.
One of the, definitely probably the most touching moment of season 2.
Absolutely.
And for a show like this, I'm not going to lie, it got me a little teary-eyed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's more than one occasion where it does do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my favorite portion of season 2 would probably be the arc of maybe it's Reagan's first like internet request where it's that woman who they go to. I can't remember exactly where they go, but it's like the folklore. And it's where they meet the guy with the big wooden beads.
Yeah.
And
with the what is it? The urban legends.
Yeah, the urban legends, and they kind of drift off to do that, and so that's like a whole mini arc in and of itself, and you get to really see a lot of cool stuff. You know, obviously more of just Mob and Reagan hanging out, more of their classic kind of shenanigans, and so I actually learned so I can't remember what it was called, but the like swamp lady that was that's like a real
that's an actual urban legend.
That's
an
cool
actual
urban legend, and it has scared many a Japanese child. So Reddit said, like, it's a real kind of urban legend, and
that's cool. It's like their I'm trying to think of a cryptid people are actually kind of freaked out about, like the Jersey Devil.
Yeah,
or
Bloody Mary. I to this day I won't go in the bathroom and do that. You know, so it's just kind of like that. And it was just really, and the flasher. Mm-hmm. That was hilarious.
Yeah.
That was so funny. And then it ends up being the guy with the beads who stops him. So it's just cool to see the characters like that who kind of you see their faces again throughout. But I love how he took off his beads and he just kind of like threw them at the guy.
That was cool.
And
like a
wrapped around his
or
legs.
something.
Yeah. And that whole like just random flasher guy was hilarious. That was super funny.
One thing I do appreciate about this show is that instead of giving us a rotating cast of characters, they do a good job of bringing back in characters they've introduced in the past and giving us more depth and more substance to those characters. And you see that a lot in this season.
Mm-hmm. I loved the beginning to their fight scene where it was like a Street Fighter, if you remember. Just they kind of switched to that little animation, 2D, side scrolling kind of. No, it was just cool to see that. And then I can't remember what was going on with the dog, where they ended up.
Oh, it had like a face paint drawn on it, and they just ended up.
So really, they went and dispelled like the urban legends. They had taken care of the flasher. They had taken care of the dog with the
like human face dog or something.
Yeah, and then the swamp kind of creature. So that was probably my favorite part. Almost like a side quest kind of thing. So I really enjoyed that.
And something I did not expect the show to go there, but the events I think it was a 5K. It wasn't like a marathon.
Oh,
anything,
yes.
But Mob starts training, and this was a really heartwarming moment as well because it shows like the depth in which his relationships have developed. He lets people know, hey, I want to be in the top 10 because this will give me the confidence to confess my love to Tsubomi.
Mm-hmm.
And Body Improvement Club steps in, like, this is what you need to do. And, like, even Reagan starts running with him. And everyone steps in to help him meet this goal.
We haven't really even... we haven't done them justice. The Body Improvement Club, like
such wholesome
awesome.
interactions,
and
one of my favorite group of people in this show.
Absolutely,
they have Mob's back no matter what every single time, and they care so much about him.
And you get to see him grow, and it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
The dude literally whenever he starts training, like he'll run X number of miles and then just collapse and pass out, lose consciousness. But bit by bit, he can run further. He just gets tired as opposed to collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the 5K was really cool. Kind of seeing him there. And then Reagan running with him at the end.
Uh-huh.
And even if I'm not mistaken, even Tsubomi kind of was like cheering him
She saw him and
yeah.
she's like, "Oh, was that Mob?"
Yeah.
And I mean, I was upset that this is how it ended up being, but Mob passes out.
Yeah.
You know, he still wasn't there.
His parents were there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they were so proud of him.
Yeah.
That was so sweet. But he passes out.
Yeah.
And it takes a really dark turn because, and this was really hard for me to watch, but Mob's coming on his way home, and
his house
is burning.
ablaze.
Yeah, and he has kind of a psychotic break, and like I need to go inside and make sure everyone's okay. And leading up to this, Ritsu gets kidnapped by Sho, and he made his appearance at the end of the first season as the Claw's leader, Suzuki, his son. So very powerful Esper as well, but he essentially takes Ritsu, and the house is burning, so Mob's making sure everyone's okay, and he walks into his parents' room, and there are 2 burning corpses.
Yeah.
And that's when he loses it.
Is this the first time we see him go, like the psychometer?
It goes
question marks as opposed to the 100. Because like whenever it hits 100, he kind of has control somewhat, whereas
he has his ideology still to some extent.
Whenever it hits the question marks, it's just full sicko mode. Like he cannot control it, and so now I kind of like the way it ended though, in regards to him not finishing the race. Nor placing anywhere near where he wanted to.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it's kind of like real life. You can relate to it. Like, I've been training for this. It didn't end how I wanted it to, but I am improving bit by bit.
And realistically, like, a week's not enough time.
Yeah.
To gain that much progress, and so this kind of segues into the last portion of season 2. And this is when shit really starts to hit the fan. Mob breaks, and he has this cool power. He doesn't showcase it ever again, but he sends out this like sonar, and he finds some powerful espers in the area, and he's like, they're the ones. And he like instant transmissions over there, and he's out for blood. And he finds out that they weren't the ones that did it. They were going to do it, but the house was already burning. By the time they made it there, so
he just drops it out of the sky and
murks on.
Yeah,
and so eventually he gets talked out of it, and this kind of becomes a pretty common thing. But whenever Mob hits that point of tapping into his emotional power, he has to like sleep to regain his
that takes
power.
like everything out of him. He just is just drained and.
So he's conked out for a while.
Yeah.
And
so it's Hanazawa, Reagan,
and yeah, Hanazawa, Reagan, some of the Scar people come in, and the Esper kids are kind of there. They don't do anything, but they're there. And So Dimple ends up being the voice of reason, which is interesting. And he's like, hey, those weren't your parents. I think those were decoy bodies. Don't feed into this. And he, in the moment, gave Mob some false hope to level him out, which was interesting to see from Dimple. And Reagan even
is this the right move? Should you tell him that?
And Reagan later reaffirms it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sweet, I appreciate the sentiment, even though I think part of it is we might get destroyed in the aftermath if we don't get this under control. But basically, Mob's kind of in a position of sleeping and resting, whereas
he's vulnerable, and they're coming after him.
And now Claw is stepping into the picture, and they utilize one of their Ultimate 5 members, whose power is that he can use his psycho waves to transmit whatever he wants across all media platforms. And I like that the show takes a moment to explain that he can't articulate how it works, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah.
Because they were like, you can't debunk this. He doesn't even know how it works.
Exactly. And it's just a classic trope that the show does so well. Mm-hmm. It's charming. It's funny, but you don't lose any. It doesn't annoy you. It's not like Goku coming back to life for the third time and you're annoyed. Or I was anyway. It's
and it kind of pokes fun at that.
Yeah,
at the same time.
It does such a good job of poking fun at it. But you still love it, and it doesn't take anything away from it.
I agree. And so Claw's really being vocal about their intentions now of world domination, and Seasoning City is ground zero for everything. So everything starts there, and they end up managing to even kidnap the prime minister. And so in the midst of all this, Ritsu and Sho and some of the Scar members mobilize, and this probably contains some of the most exciting fights up to this point.
Yeah, they really stepped it up, and you could tell maybe their budget got a little.
Season 1 did well enough.
Yeah,
they got some money,
and because these fight scenes are sweet.
Very
season
cool.
2.
And so all seems lost as the Espers kind of struggle to make their way to the Culture Tower, which is where Suzuki is holding up.
The teleporter who had kidnapped the prime minister. I can't remember
Ryu?
his name. Yeah.
Ryu.
Yeah, he that fight scene was sweet.
He is strong.
Yeah, and it's I don't think he's ever been touched before. Mm-hmm. Even so, we have some of the former Claw members. Some of the Body Improvement Club is there. Hanazawa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Hanazawa. Him and Sho and Ritsu and the Claw members are kind of dealing with Ryo, however you say his name. And Ritsu actually creates an opening for Sho to go in to the Culture Tower, because ultimately he has beef with his dad, and that's all he really cares about. So he starts that process, whereas everyone's kind of getting it handed to them. And at this point, Mob is up and going again, and this is when he goes up against Minagishi, the plant guy. Which that was a really interesting interaction.
Floral Esper.
And Matsuo, who's the poison jar guy, he gets into the mix, and Mogami, the evil spirit, accidentally gets released, and he takes form into this giant skeletal plant looking aberration, and makes quick work of Nagishi and is about to kill him, and Mob's like, no, people can change.
Yeah, people can change.
Which is the root of him. And Mob really has a a moment with Mogami, and he reluctantly, okay, fine, and but he does leave him with some advice that Mob really does take to heart, that he needs to be more strict with others, and once doing that, he'll be unbeatable.
Yeah, Mob's heart is hardened just a little, ever so slightly here, and he does take that. He does realize, like, I do need to be a little bit more how stern, with some people.
Because really, he's been pretty. He hasn't had much of a backbone.
Yeah,
he'll kind of just go with whatever people tell him. So Mob's making his way to the commotion, and everyone's all out against Ryo, who they're kind of fighting all together to try and overwhelm him because he's blind.
And that's where we see
the mind's eye.
Yeah,
so cool. And then Reagan comes in to the rescue with his self-defense rush.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, just like a knee to the head or something.
Yeah.
It's like, he calls it self-defense rush to not get in trouble.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
I think it's like it's totally, they don't expect it. I think that's like it's just such a wow, like he just walks right up, you have no idea he's going to do this, and then
because he has no psychic powers.
Yeah, self-defense rush, and then just starts giving it to him. Hilarious. Cheap shot, kind of, I guess you can kind of say.
Mm-hmm. And then that paired with Mob's immense power approaching him, he folds. He's like, I was doing this for fun all along, which pisses off Mob. Yeah. He's like, do you see what your fun has created?
Yeah.
And that kind of segues into I guess his emotional state leading up to the fight, which at this point Mob really does take Mogami's, I guess, words to heart, and in probably the sternest he's ever talked to the group, he said he's going in alone because you're going to get in my way. Mm-hmm. And he didn't sugarcoat it or anything, and it came from a good place.
Yeah.
But that was really interesting to see Mob speak that way. And so it's just Mob and Dimple going in. And at this point, Serizawa comes into the picture. I really liked his character. Pretty relatable as far as, like, he's had a hard time. And so he's kind of escaped the world and his problems.
Yeah, so I really thought that, what do you think about, I really thought that Serizawa and Suzuki shadow, they're like the polar opposites
of like Reagan and Mob.
Mm-hmm. And whereas Serizawa's kind of like possibly who Mob could have become if he didn't have like Reagan as an outlet.
I agree with that, because Serizawa really became the person he was because Suzuki set out to find him, and he was creating this army, and it was the bad influence. Whereas Reagan solidified within Mob, like, these powers don't define you. Mm-hmm. You can still be Mob.
Yeah.
And so that is a very interesting duality, and I think that's why they end up being characters that relate to each other. Mm-hmm. Because eventually, it's a pretty hard fight, but Mob eventually gets the upper hand, and without defeating him, they have like a mental link, and Serizawa realizes that Mob's felt the same pain. Mm-hmm. Like, we may not have had the same experiences, but he understands. Like, I finally met someone who understands.
Yeah.
And they create a friendship, which is really moving. Honestly, a lot of really nice emotional points in this season. And so Serizawa eventually allows him to go forward, and Mob enters the fight. And what really gets Suzuki's attention is the fact that he transfers some of his energy to Sho, which was how Suzuki built his army. He has such a tremendous energy that he gave it to all these random people. Mm-hmm. And once everyone was kind of down and out, he took all his energy back. And after seeing Mob do it, he's like, I finally have a rival. I finally met another person in this world who can maybe measure up to me.
Yeah.
Because he traveled the whole globe to try and find anyone that could, do what he does. And so this fight ends up being pretty interesting because he basically gives Sho the energy to leave. Suzuki and Mob kind of have a back and forth, and it really pisses off Mob because Mob and Suzuki's ideologies are very different, and it kind of builds up to a breaking point with Reagan because he shows up and he has the pistol that the weapons user kept around, and so Mob uses it, or not Mob, excuse me. Reagan uses it, obviously doesn't do anything, and so Reagan does what he always does, and he tries to talk his way out of it, and this just pisses off Suzuki, and he, what looks like explodes Reagan. Then Serizawa comes to the rescue. We don't know this yet, but Serizawa comes in, saves Reagan, takes him away, but Mob snaps. He thinks his parents are dead, or he went through the trauma of thinking that, and now Reagan's hurt too. So he loses it, and he experiences his unleashed rage. And this was pretty over the top because it ended up being a situation in which Mob takes the tower into the sky, so there's no other disturbances, and they can just let loose, which was really sweet. And then they exert so much power that Mob has no other choice but to absorb Suzuki's energy, because he finally goes to 100%, because through the battle it shows like 25% power, 50% power, and once Mob loses it, he unleashes everything as well, and it ends up being a pretty sick fight to watch. But he unleashes so much energy he loses control, and it's essentially going to be like a bomb. So everyone leaves, and Suzuki was surprised that Mob stayed, and he's like, well, I can stay and absorb this, and it's not going to do as much damage, so and I haven't lost faith in you still. And that really, I think that's what finally earned Suzuki's respect for Mob. He doesn't change a whole lot, but I think that made an impression. And the absorption of all that power does save the town and creates what we know later as the Divine Tree. Which finally we know what the broccoli's about.
And which of course the beginning of the season, right? There was like that corn, maybe not corn, that whatever spirit, in which they had defeated that, and Mob had kind of just taken those seeds, or the farmer had.
The broccoli seeds were like a reward or something, and he had them in his pocket.
Yeah, he has had them in his pocket, and then.
Because they even say like that's a bold fashion choice, Mob.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was interesting because they've alluded the broccoli in both season 1 and 2's intros. And that was something I just picked up on because I was like, that's really weird. I mean, this is obviously a weird show, but why is there a repeating theme of broccoli? And so they finally tap into that. And all is well. And we make it into the 3rd season, which...
and another thing is a good callback is to in the beginning of season 1, whenever... Mob easily defeats Dimple and LOL. Remind me of her name. So there's the psycho helmet. Some of the people who are like super impressed with Mob and in his feet there, and there's that rough, poorly done drawing of Mob.
With the psycho helmet religion.
And that's where the kind of psycho helmet religion kind of stems from. And at the time, there very few members. I think maybe the journalist gal kind of she has something to do with it. And then
she basically spends her time convincing Mob this is worth your time. She really wants Mob to be essentially a figurehead to a religion.
for whatever. I mean, she's just bored and wants that to happen for
I
whatever
think she
reason.
literally. I think her name's Misato.
Yeah, it is
And
Misato.
she literally says like, "I'm in middle school and I'm bored. This
Yeah.
is fun."
and so now, so that transpires. There's that we first see Psycho Helmet, and then don't really talk about it too much.
But it's
you
starting
see
to
it here and
gain
there.
traction.
Yeah, and like it's this whole religion that these people kind of start up, and then you see in season 2, the reward money, that the 500,000 yen. I can't remember exactly how, but somehow that just kind of gets donated to the Psycho Helmet religion, and so now that's really kind of how they kick off huge traction at the end of season 2. Is that's where all that money goes.
And then the divine tree ends up being something they really anchor onto, because they're like, this is the work of the Psycho Helmet.
Yes, and so it's just cool to see like that started in season 1, and very like cleverly and just well written.
Mm-hmm.
The way it progresses is just nice to see.
It is, and season 3 really touches on some interesting concepts that come with like the growing pains of coming of age. Like in the first episode, Mob really struggles with being lost in your future. He's about to need to decide, am I going to go to high school? Am I going to lean into spirits and such?
Mm-hmm.
What is my path?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, even beyond middle school, high school age people.
Mm-hmm.
And Mob has a lot of pain in basically bringing up to Reagan, like, I don't see this as long term.
Yeah.
And even Reagan's like, I didn't expect you to. And you could tell how relieved Mob was to finally get that off his chest and move on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really the beginning of season 3 is kind of slice of lifey. Mob gets a lot of happiness from being involved in his school and in his clubs, and
his friends in the telepathy club, they kind of flesh out a lot more often, and they're inviting him out outside of school more, and just like you said, he's really just enjoying that and those experiences.
And he and at this point, I think it's when the Psycho Helmet religion starts broadcasting out that they're essentially having like interviews to find their leader.
Mm-hmm.
And Reagan's like, you need to do this, there's some money here.
Yeah, there's some money.
This is an interesting segue into another development with Mob, and he kind of starts to pick up an ego. He starts to think like, oh, girls are interested in me now. And he has this hilarious like Chad, like beautiful Squidward face, and
he sees Hanazawa out walking, and Hanazawa's always been popular, and girls have always been drawn to him, and they're in that moment like, oh, there's Hanazawa, and they're oogling at him. But now with Mob and his inflated ego, he's like, they're looking at me, like, and he's like, Hanazawa, check this out, they're looking at me, and which Hanazawa just kind of reassures him. He's like, yeah, man, like, good for you.
Yeah.
And Ritsu, his brother, does the same thing.
And so Mob's like, okay, I'm gonna. And at this point, the president of the telepathy club, it's like, hey, Sunday, I want to go hang out with you and try and find other telepaths.
Mm-hmm.
And the reporter, Mezumi, she's like, hey, I want you to come with me to the Psycho Helmet interviews, and I want you to do that. and so Mob's really starting to feel like he's popular with the ladies.
And then this is at this point, Dimple kind of, again, Dimple, who's the only one who's ever been straightforward with him, truthful to a fault, tells him like, hey, I get it, like, but I don't think this is really what's going on.
Yeah.
And at this point,
very brutally honest.
Yeah, and at this point,
Mob shuts him down and shuts him out.
Yeah, shuts him down, shuts him out. And Dimple kind of is like, all right, and just kind of just takes off. And I don't know, this is just interesting, kind of how that works in their dynamic.
It really is, and I think at the end of this episode, because Mob gets ghosted. It was, and I guess before that, because I thought this was kind of, and it's a gag that keeps repeating throughout the season, but Reagan encourages Mob to like, oh yeah, get some new clothes.
Yeah.
And so, of course, he asks Hanazawa to come with him because he's the sense of fashion. And I think he has like 15,000 yen. So they go out and there's this really ugly monkey shirt that Mob ends up being like, okay, this is
like
cool.
On the clearance rack too, because everything else is
way out of his budget.
Yeah.
And so Mob gets his fly monkey shirt and gets ghosted by both. And so that's kind of a blow to his ego. And he finds out that the Psycho-Helmet religion has found their figurehead, which is a plant version of him.
Mob, yeah.
And at this point, there's an interesting transition of like, we get to see a Dimple that has showed some compassion and caring for Mob, as far as like his parents dying and him giving him some hope to like, hey, like let's level your emotions out. Like, I don't think this is legit, which it ended up being true.
It's very easy to kind of forget just all the adventures that they go on together, and how Dimple is around so much. It's easy to forget his true intentions
of becoming a god.
Yeah.
And so this is where he leans into his obsession with being a god, and there's a lot of divine tree hysteria. It's really spreading rampant throughout the city, and they start passing out that candy that brainwashes
and they
people.
start noticing the cracks in all the buildings and street that the roots of the massive broccoli tree are causing. And it's cool to see the floral esper kind of he's doing better now. He's running the shop or helping the shop be run, and
all the Scar people kind of settled into odd jobs of some sort, which has been kind of fun to see them out and about. And at this point, things start to develop into a pretty serious problem in that Mob is the only one who is not brainwashed at this point by the divine tree or the Psycho-Helmet religion. And he shows a lot of character development by stepping up and acknowledging that he's going to have to take on this alone, because even like Tara's not here to back him up, Ritsu's not here to back him up, and Reagan's not even there to back him up. And this is when he is confronting God Dimple, which he gets his physique back. Yeah,
which is so sweet. Almost like it's making fun of, like Golden Frieza.
Yeah,
you know, it's awesome to see. It's so well written, so well animated.
It was a cool fight, and it was really touching because you get to see how much Mob really appreciated having Dimple around and how much she's really grown to like him.
And how they're a friend. Like, Mob considered him a friend.
Mm-hmm. It's very touching. And Mob refused to fight him. He even lets Dimple absorb all his energy. And
in I guess the opposite of typical anime Mob in their fight, Mob submits first, and lets him absorb his everything, and just kind of is wanting to talk to him, and it's not like he doesn't beat Dimple into submission.
But all in all, and to talk about the laugh out loud moments, because throughout this fight, Mob's meter is building up, and I thought it was hilarious that what brought him to 100 was Dimple ragging on his shirt.
Yeah.
That was just great.
Yeah, he's like, of course, because Dimple's the one who's always keeping it 100 with him. And Dimple's like, what the hell are you wearing, Yeah. And, Reagan had told him the shirt was nice. Ritsu had told him the shirt was nice. Hanazawa is the one who, went with him and picked out the shirt for him. And so, in typical Dimple fashion, he lets him know, like, this shirt sucks.
Yeah. And we get an interesting deep dive on Mob and Dimple's dynamic, and you really get to chew on these things, like, does Dimple really care about Mob and his growth, or was it just a stepping stone to achieve these goals of becoming a god? And
I like how Dimple goes from I want to become god of man to I want to become god of man with Mob.
Yeah. Mob was more upset, or he was touched that Dimple wanted him to be a part of it. And that's when it clicked to Dimple that I don't think I ever really wanted to become a god. I think all I wanted was a true friend. And I found that in Mob. And oh God, what am I doing? And at that point, it transitions into another interesting dialogue when, something like a religion or an organization becomes so big and so fanatic. The entity itself takes on, its own ideology, and it becomes bigger than what the leader is. And that happened with the Divine Tree, because it essentially became its own independent thing when Dimple moved away from it. And Dimple essentially sacrificed himself to make sure Mob got out okay, and the Divine Tree is no more.
Yeah.
And it was really sad because Mob didn't really know how he got home. He didn't really know what happened, but
he just woke up at home, right?
And he just thanked Dimple and cried, and it was good.
Oh man, yes, it was so touching.
And then following up that was just a heartwarming showcase of the Telepathy Club, and them kind of going out and going on a trip and trying to interact with aliens, because that's what the president always wanted. And she was getting ready to graduate and realized she fucked off.
Yeah.
And has no concrete memories. And so the group feels pretty bad, and they want to give her that. And so they go up to the mountains. It ends up being pretty chaotic. They get lost. They eventually find a path.
Yeah.
And they do this chant and some very
and they're doing it with the ideology that this is nothing's gonna happen, but we're just gonna do this just to do it.
Yeah.
Just because that's what we
shared experience.
Yeah, exactly. They don't expect aliens to come or for their chant to reach anybody.
No, and the aliens super cute.
Yeah, that was
big sparkling eyes, little pink eyes.
That probably was my least favorite part of the whole show.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it was. I don't know. It was just so strange.
Not what I would think an alien would look like.
Right, and then even it was just so random. And I mean, I get like we did get to experience their shared experience, and it was cool seeing them kind of like we just made contact with them.
I feel like it was what people who are involved in clubs, how their like last little interaction with that group feels like, which was pretty wholesome, because they were just like, they had an all-nighter, they enjoyed each other's company, and
the one gets left.
Oh yeah, in Inukawa, the blonde guy, he gets left, and he becomes like the king of that race. And he comes back, and so that was a lot of fun. And So following that, I think this next episode is an exploration on the struggles of expressing your feelings to someone you care for. We find out that Tsubomi's moving, and Mob is notably perturbed. He's like, thought I had a whole another year to get ready and be a presentable man to let her know that I want to date her. And
in his, he's thinking this in his head, and then I love how the camera pans out, and you can see every single male student is also struggling.
It was a rejection factory. Eventually. Yeah, everyone. You see all the text of like, I need to ask her out.
Yeah, and they're all like amongst one another, like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even get to ask her out yet.
Yeah. So, I think this is also a great showcase of how much Mob had grown and changed throughout the show. He started off as a kid with no friends, and Reagan was really all he did as far as his time. And now he's involved in a club, and he has met a colorful cast of people that he's grown very close to. And he can say without a doubt, I have friends.
Yeah.
I have people who care about me. And he consulted all of them of like, hey, I want to ask out Tsubomi, what do you think? And I think that really built him up. And he eventually reached out, called her, and met up, or at least planned to meet up at the park. And this was pretty rough, but he meets up with the Scar guy or not the Scar guy, one of the Ultimate Five, and he gets like a nice bouquet of flowers.
Yeah.
And he's on his way.
The floral, because he sees Mob with some
like a tiny little bouquet.
Yeah,
It was like 2 flowers.
He's like, let me help you out here.
Which was cool. And he eventually makes his way to the park that they always played in as a kid, and it was another like throw you through a loop moment, because tragedy almost happened. A cat almost got ran over, so he stopped it.
Yeah.
And then him and a kid start moving forward, and a car's about to run this kid over, so Mob pushes him out of the way and gets hit instead. In true Mob fashion of, I'm not using my powers.
Yeah.
And something snaps. He goes into a coma, whatever.
When I watched this, I was just stunned. Seeing, like, Mob get hit, blood everywhere, Mob's blood.
Oh, so hard.
Is seemingly dead, right? So it was just a total curveball.
Yeah, what's happening?
Total curveball. Even more so than Mob initially choosing the Body Improvement Club over this is an even bigger left turn than that.
Yeah.
And you were just like, what just happened?
Another one of those moments where I was like, I didn't think the show would go here,
Yeah.
Which was cool. And so at this point, Mob is in full-on emotional form, lost control, rampaging through the town, and Teru, or Hanazawa, he shows up. And this was a really touching moment too, because it shows how important their friendship and rivalry is to Hanazawa, because he does everything to stop him, and Hanazawa really exudes Mob's mentality of, these powers are not to harm people, and you're just as, he even said something like, you're just as weak as I am, because look at what you're doing right now. And,
Yeah.
Another funny moment of Teru's hair being lobbed off.
Yes.
So he's bald again.
Yeah.
Which I was really hoping for a return of the giant tall hair.
Yeah.
Which it was still ridiculous what he ended up going with, but not to that length. But to see the lengths that Hanazawa went through to stop and protect Mob was really touching. And I think an interesting conclusion to this little segment was bringing Suzuki back into the picture, because they had that helicopter coming in with all the Esper convicts, and they were like, all right, if you can stop this, you get a reduction of your sentence.
Yeah.
And don't forget we're watching you, so don't pull anything. And without skipping a beat, Mob and Suzuki are in the mix, and Sho shows up, and in the meantime, while that interaction's going on, Ritsu, it's clicked to him like something's wrong with Mob. I need to check this out, and he starts putting the pieces together like something happened to Mob. Like obviously, there's blood here, and this is where the destruction began. I think he got hit by a car. This isn't him, and so Ritsu's on the path, and we get an interesting perspective too on his take on the trauma, I guess, from that event, because really they should have talked about it, and Ritsu was so afraid to upset Mob like that again that he didn't overstep, and Mob was filled with so much shame for losing control like that he never reached out, and things could have been completely different if they just communicated, which was an interesting insight. And I feel like we got some really good character progression between them too, because they both kind of realized it's time to move forward from this.
Right.
And it's kind of touching because when Ritsu finally shows up, and Suzuki, he folds. He realized that he's made too many choices as far as I've picked this crazy Esper obsession over my family, so this time I'm going to leave all I can with Sho. Which was cool. Finally get some progression with him.
Absolutely.
And now Ritsu's there, and he's showing Mob, I'm your brother, lean on me. Like, come on.
Like, this is what brothers are for.
And then we get this internal dialogue of Mob, the psyche, and Mob, the emotions, and the split between them.
Yeah, it's really the first time you see anything like that, and so that was really interesting in and of itself.
And in the midst of all this chaos, it cuts to Tsubomi, and she's literally sitting through a tornado to speak to Mob. And her thoughts were like, he was kind of shaking on the phone. I should really...
Yeah, I'll wait. Even though this is all going on, I'll wait around and I'll hear him out. I'll hear what he has to say.
So it really makes you wonder, like, does she feel the same?
Yeah.
Because that's some devotion right there.
Absolutely.
And because she's literally staring at a tornado. And probably my favorite Reagan moment is this, when he braves the storm. He throws off his shoes, and he's like, secretly, I've been working out and exercising and getting in shape too, because you can't surpass me.
Yeah.
And so he starts running full force into the storm.
Getting abused, and he keeps getting up, and he keeps coming after Mob, and which really shows like he cares so deeply for Mob.
And I loved the return of the original intro as Reagan was like powering through everything. It was really a cool moment. It gave me some like little goosebumps, and what was really nice is Reagan finally comes clean.
He said, Mob, the first time you came to me, like, I lied to you, And even though, like, it does kind of, the show does kind of maybe teeter on that Mob knows all along. Like, you never really know, but it kind of alludes to maybe that he does.
Because his emotional side did.
Right. It just,
It
exactly.
totally did.
Yeah, so, but even so, Reagan still felt like he needed to apologize for that.
He needed to say it.
Even though he's assumed Mob probably knew already, he needed to say, like, I lied to you, like, the first time we ever met. And so that was huge. And, oh, man, just that whole...
It was so moving. And on top of that, we got Dimple back, because you didn't know what happened after the Divine Tree, which I was really happy to see. And it was just moving. Reagan got emotional, and he was crying and apologizing, and that snapped Mob out of it. And he was finally able to accept himself and face Tsubomi. And equally sad is Mob returning from rejection, but I think this showed the most character development, because he
was okay with it.
Yeah, he didn't go out of control emotionally because that rejection, obviously very painful.
Yeah.
And I think the conclusion summary to kind of wrap everything up was really wholesome. Everyone's still, close, and I really liked seeing Mob in the Body Improvement Club. He was running up in front with everyone.
Yeah.
He wasn't lagging along.
And it showed like the new recruits
Mhm.
and how Mob kind of like giving them some encouragement. And just you can see he's come such a long way. This is obviously what it's all about, kind of thing.
Mhm. I think this was really this anime did a great job at showcasing everyone's development, and I think everyone made really good progress as characters. Of course, you always want the main character to showcase a lot of progression, but I think a lot of the side characters showed some great progression, like Dimple and Reagan probably made the most.
Yeah, and everyone really Mob encountered all of the Claw, members. They kind of had you get to see all their growth.
Everyone in Mob's life really grew with him, and that was really touching. And I really liked the surprise party because Reagan, his birthday's never really meant anything to him.
Mm-hmm.
So it was nice that, because Mob remembered it.
Yeah, and so what is the gal in the president of the club? Like she's working.
She's a worker there now.
She's working there now.
She's been there for like 6 months.
Yeah.
She's in high school. And
Sarazawa's there now. So, Reagan's business is still up and running. I mean, he's employed those two new people.
And he's doing jobs on his own too.
So, yeah, exactly. He's doing jobs on his
Dimple.
own. And I can't exactly remember, but his dialogue. But he is kind of talking about his birthday, and he's kind of like, oh, another day. Here we're, and then just opens the door. Pop, pop.
Yeah.
Surprise.
So nice.
Yeah, and he was just stunned, and that was just so awesome to see. Everyone there ready, supporting him, and it was awesome. It's perfect ending. I just
Good
love,
ending. Very good.
Yeah,
ending.
like Mob gets rejected. He
bounces back. They talk.
Yeah, they still talk. Like he bounces back, and he's still able to build a friendship with them. They talk often on the phone.
Yeah,
him and,
weekly.
Tsubame. So.
So, if you're thinking about giving season 3 a watch, excellent decision. And the vitality rating on this, tremendous.
Tremendous.
And I think the overall message, and they've really touched on it, is people need other people. And Mob, clearly the catalyst for that. He grew as much as he did because of the people in his life, and vice versa. The people in his life grew with him. And characters were great. Pacing was very good.
The animation art style, awesome. I really loved just the little details, like so. Whenever their bodies are radiating with.
I like how everyone had their own aura.
Exactly. Yeah, their aura, and in their aura it was like these 3-dimensional moving.
Like Suzuki had like a motherboard looking.
Yeah.
And Mob's was like a holographic card.
And I feel like I can't do it doesn't do it justice. This anime was really funny.
It really was.
And where it's equally as heartwarming, as action packed, and as funny. And it's such a great culmination.
It's a roller coaster.
Of all of those things. Yeah, and it is a roller coaster. And even though we talked about it so much. If you haven't seen it, you have to check it out.
Don't sleep on it.
It's awesome.
I didn't get into it until season 3 was airing, and I hated that I waited this long. So don't deny yourself this experience. It's absolutely worth it. It's not a huge commitment. It's 3, 12, 13 episode seasons, so absolutely worth the time.
Yeah, and so another thing I forgot to mention earlier on. Reagan dude looks like he can give some killer massages, man.
Yeah.
Those scenes were sweet.
I would pay for one.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
With the salt on my shoulders and. No, all in all,
It was a lot of fun.
yeah. And I think, personally, this is just kind of me circling back, but I think the episode that they went on the hike and tried to interact with UFOs probably showcased the animation style the best. Outside of fights, I mean, fights do a really great job at that, but there were so many interesting angles and interesting ways that they animated it that I think just taking some time to appreciate that episode alone shows the quality and
From my
the
favorite
character of the show.
Studio Bones, my favorite anime studio. So I just love that Mob Psycho was one of theirs.
Yeah.
What would you say is what's one of your favorite or biggest takeaway? What's something that what's a message that really just kind of stuck with you from this? What would you say?
For me personally, there was a quote from the third season, and it was, "Go ahead and worry, everyone does. It's only natural." That really hit me because, one, you need to kind of let go sometimes. Worrying's only going to hinder you, but it's acknowledging and accepting the fact that you kind of just are going to anyways, and that's a part of the process. And kind of the overall message, people need other people. There's nothing wrong in leaning into the people you care about or to find comfort in a community. I think those are very interesting and important takeaways. So what would you say are some of the lessons you learned from this?
Absolutely. I just really I loved the Body Improvement Club.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, man, and
So awesome.
that kind of goes in with lean on other people. But I just love Mob's perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think what stuck with me. It's just something whenever you're feeling stuck or just down in general, just never give up.
Mm-hmm.
Improve little by little, all the time.
Yeah, it's the small improvements every day.
Yes, small improvements every day, and you'll probably be surprised with what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
You'll surprise yourself in what you're capable of, and I really liked that message. That's probably what stuck with me the most, and what I had taken from it. And that's something I think I can definitely try to apply to my everyday life. And it's a fun way to kind of I'll think back on this anime and think about I'm feeling down right now, but I've never give up. And in my own body improvement journey,
absolutely.
and every that not even just that, it kind of applies to everything. It's all encompassing. So that's probably my favorite message or what I had taken away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So love that. But yeah, I liked yours. I liked the people need other people. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
huge. That's awesome. There's no shame in needing somebody,
No, and Mob's really the embodiment of that.
Oh yeah.
It's his development really happened when he allowed other people in his life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, anything else? I think I've talked out
Yeah.
this anime, and let us know what you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
What you think about the podcast, and maybe what you'd like to see next.
Yeah. Let us know what we could do better, and what you'd like to see next. So please let us know. We had fun. We had fun doing this.
Absolutely. Always drink Gong Fu, and until next time.
Until next time.